Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the prison you've been trying to escape your whole life was built by you, not by accident, not by ignorance, but by a quiet, unspoken choice. No guards, no locked doors, just a set of invisible bars wrapped in comfort, routine, and just enough distraction to keep you from ever noticing they were there. And then, imagine discovering that the key to your escape had always been in your pocket, but you never reached for it, because you didn't want to. That's the paradox. You say you want freedom, you fight for it, you dream of it, you even envy those who seem to have it, and yet, when no one is watching, when the noise dies down and the mirror stares back, you cling to your chains like a child clutching a favorite blanket, not because they're beautiful, not because they're strong, but because they're familiar, predictable, safe. What if I told you that your deepest fear isn't failure, but freedom, that beyond all the talk of self-improvement, independence, and living your best life, you are secretly terrified of what total, uncompromising freedom would demand of you? Because freedom is not ease, it is not comfort, it is not a tropical beach with no emails. Freedom is the terrifying realization that no one is coming to save you, that your life is yours alone, its meaning, its direction, its weight, that nothing and no one can be blamed anymore. Not your parents, not society, not trauma, not your genes, not your ex, not God. Freedom is brutal because it exposes the unbearable truth. You are responsible for what happens next. And once you see that, once you taste the raw, infinite space that opens up beyond victimhood and excuses, you feel something strange. Not joy, not empowerment, panic, disorientation, grief. Because every structure you used to lean on, morality, culture, identity, starts to dissolve. The walls fall, the roof leaked. FTS, the floor vanishes, and you're left floating. You were never afraid of being caged. You were afraid of having to fly. Have you noticed how people cling to ideologies, routines, even pain? They'll tell you it's noble, that they're just being loyal, traditional, disciplined. But if you dig deeper, if you really listen, you'll hear it. The whisper underneath it all. Tell me what to do. Tell me who I am. Even the boldest people, the artists, the rebels, the so-called free spirits, they often build their entire personalities around some external opposition. They don't break the game, they just switch teams. But what if there was no team, no system, no script, just you, no applause, no punishment, just the silent, terrifying question, now what? That's the price of real freedom. And that's why most people, maybe even you, subconsciously run from it. Better the predictable misery of limitation than the overwhelming vastness of possibility. Because when you are truly free, there are no excuses left, only choices. Every moment, a new one. And the fear isn't that you'll choose wrong. The fear is that you'll finally see how much power you actually have and realize you've been wasting it. You've been waiting for permission while secretly hoping you'd never get it. Because then you'd have to do something with it. And what if you fail? What if you succeed? What if there's no one left to blame when the dream doesn't feel how you imagined? So instead, you stay busy, scroll, complain, achieve, repeat, and call it life. But deep inside, you know, you feel the tension, don't you? The friction between the life you perform and the life that haunts you, the one you'd live if you were truly, terrifyingly free. So let me ask you something. What are you still obeying? What are you still waiting for? Who are you still trying to please? And, most importantly, what would you become if you let it all go? Not a better version of yourself, not a successful one, a real one, unfiltered, undirected, unowned. But to walk that path, you'll have to confront something ancient, something buried, a force older than culture, deeper than fear. You'll have to confront the part of yourself that wants the cage and find out why it built it in the first place. That's where we're going next, but be warned. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So why do you fear freedom? Why would a creature born with the fire of will, the hunger for autonomy, and the mind to shape entire worlds, choose to remain small? Why would you, a being capable of endless reinvention, stay loyal to patterns that suffocate you? The answer isn't simple. It's not laziness. It's not weakness. It's deeper than that. It's psychological armor, forged in childhood, reinforced by culture, and sanctified by philosophy misunderstood. Let's go back, not to your first success, not to your first failure. Back to when you were nothing but a scream and a breath, helpless, dependent, a sponge soaking up meaning before you even had words. You didn't learn the world, you absorbed it, like a religion passed through touch, tone, and silence. Your freedom didn't die with age, it was traded for love, for approval, for safety. Because early on you learned a terrifying rule. To be loved, I must not be too much, too wild, too honest, too curious, too free. So you dimmed yourself, edited your instincts, became what they needed, what the world applauded, and in that moment you became divided. Carl Jung called it the creation of the persona, the mask we wear to survive in society. It's not fake, it's partial. A version of you, stripped of contradictions, polished for the world. But behind the mask, the rest of you waits, and it watches. Freedom terrifies the persona. Our freedom means facing what lies beneath it. The chaos, the hunger, the unknown self. And when you spend your whole life trying to be good, respectable, or successful, you begin to fear anything that threatens that identity, especially your own depth. You confuse comfort for truth, control for wisdom, achievement for meaning. But here's the twist. You can only find meaning in the places you've been taught to avoid, in the tension, in the uncertainty, in the raw, unsanitized chaos of your own being. But we're trained to run from that. Think of how our society is structured. It sells you answers before you've even formed your questions. It gives you paths, roles, timelines, school, career, marriage, retirement, death. Each milestone, another layer of illusion that says, you're doing it right, just keep going, don't look back. Jean-Paul Sartre warned us of this. He said we are condemned to be free, because once you realize there is no grand designer dictating your purpose, you are forced to become your own God. And that's not liberation, it's torment, because now the burden is yours. You must decide who you are, why you exist, what matters and what doesn't. There is no script anymore, no cosmic applause, only the silence of an uncaring universe, and the echo of your own choices. And that, right there, that silence, is what we try to drown, with dopamine, with entertainment, with achievement, even with pain. Viktor Frankl, who found meaning in the belly of the Holocaust, wrote that the modern man is not tormented by suffering, but by meaninglessness. Because once survival is secured, the soul begins to speak, and what it asks is terrifying. What now? When you no longer have to be anything, what will you choose? Most people never answer, not because they can't, but because answering requires destroying the false self. Let's go deeper. There's a part of your mind, ancient, primal, that resists change even when it's good. It equates the known with survival, and so, no matter how toxic your current reality is, it feels safer than the unknown freedom beyond it. This is the ego's great deception. It whispers, stay where you are. At least here you know the rules. But the rules were made by people more afraid than you, by systems built to keep you obedient, predictable, manageable. And you inherited them. You memorized the manual without knowing who wrote it. Nietzsche saw this coming. He wrote of the last man, a creature of comfort, dulled senses, and low ambition, a man who avoided pain, risk, and depth in exchange for a tranquil, hollow existence. He feared that modernity would turn us into insects of convenience, buzzing safely in circles, never questioning the cage. And look around. We are medicated, distracted, domesticated. We glorify self-care over self-confrontation. We mistake external change for internal revolution. But underneath it all, the soul still knocks. And the longer you ignore it, the louder it gets. Until one day, perhaps in crisis or silence or heartbreak, you hear it whisper, "You're not free. You never were." Not because you're weak, not because the world is evil, but because you've never dared to claim what was always yours, the right to be, raw, whole, and undirected, to stumble without apology, to choose without consensus, to live without a script. That is freedom, and it's terrifying, because it demands everything. But now that you've seen it, now that you've felt it, you can't go back. You'll try, maybe. The world will invite you, but you'll know the truth. The cage is too small, and your soul has outgrown it. Still, seeing the problem isn't the same as escaping it. To break free, you must see what that cage has done to your life, what it has stolen, without you even noticing. And that's where we go next. You may think the sir. At your fear of freedom is abstract, philosophical, something reserved for midnight thoughts or college debates. But it isn't. It shapes everything. The job you took, the partner you stayed with, the dreams you buried, the rage you swallowed, the parts of yourself you quietly abandoned, not because you lacked the opportunity, but because opportunity demanded choice, and choice meant risk, and risk meant freedom. So you settled, and you didn't call it that. You called it being realistic, growing up, making peace. But really, it was fear. Fear, cleverly disguised as maturity. And that fear has consequences, not dramatic, cinematic ones. Worse, subtle ones. The kind of consequences that gnaw at you slowly, quietly, until one day, you look in the mirror and don't recognize the eyes staring back. You see it in your habits, that mindless scroll at 1 a.m., not because you're entertained, but because silence would force you to confront the question you keep avoiding. Is this the life I chose, or the one I was handed? You see it in the way you talk to others, how you say yes when you mean no, how you laugh when something inside you dies, how you downplay your passions, your pain, your depth. Not because you're polite, but because freedom would require you to speak the truth, and that truth might cost you approval, connection, even love. So you shrink, you filter, you perform, and call it being liked. But you know what it really is? Self-erasure, death by 1,000 smiles. And you see it in your body, the tension in your shoulders that never leaves, the weight in your chest, the sudden tears when nothing seems wrong. That's not stress, it's grief. The grief of unlived potential, the grief of being caged not by others, but by the version of yourself you thought the world would accept. You thought it would make you feel safe, but it made you numb. Because when you take your freedom, you don't. Become calm, you become hollow. And here's the cruelest part. The world rewards this. It rewards your obedience, your predictability, your smile in the meeting, your go with the flow. You're always there for others. It tells you, you're so grounded, you're so humble, you're so strong, but you're not strong. You're surviving, on autopilot, trained, domesticated. And each time you trade authenticity for approval, you reinforce the invisible walls that trap you. Not all cages are made of iron. Some are made of compliments, of expectations, of comfort. Let's go deeper still. Think about your relationships, not just romantic ones, your friendships, your family, even how you treat strangers. How many of those are built on who you really are, and how many are built on who you learn to be? Every time you lie to avoid conflict, every time you mirror someone else just to be accepted, every time you hold back your fire so you don't intimidate anyone, you send yourself a message. My truth is too dangerous to be seen. And you wonder why you feel disconnected, why you feel lonely, even in a crowd, why you crave something real but run from it when it shows up. Because real connection requires freedom, the freedom to be seen in your chaos, in your contradictions, in your shadow. But if you've spent your life performing, then love feels like a threat. Because love, true love, demands vulnerability. And vulnerability is incompatible with a life lived behind masks. This fear of freedom doesn't just destroy lives, it shapes civilizations. Entire societies have been built on the avoidance of freedom. Religions that offer eternal answers, political systems that trade liberty for order, cultures that define your worth before you're even old enough to question it. We were taught to obey before we were taught to think. And now, we call it identity. We build brands around our shroud. We monetize our labels. We turn our wounds into currency, all to avoid the terrifying truth. You are not your story. You are not your pain. You are not even your past. You are free. And that's what makes it so terrifying. Because if you are free, then nothing is certain. Not your job, not your beliefs, not your marriage, not even yourself. And that kind of uncertainty feels like death. until you realize that it's birth. But we weren't taught how to be free. We were taught how to win, how to conform, how to survive. So when real freedom shows up, we confuse it for danger. We fight it, sabotage it, numb it. And that's the unseen tragedy, that you could go your whole life, safe, admired, successful, and never actually live, because living requires risk, responsibility, and the willingness to lose everything false in order to find what's real. And now, here you are, reading this, feeling something rise inside you, something ancient, maybe even dangerous. Not anger, not fear, something deeper, a hunger. A hunger not for pleasure or comfort or power, but for truth, for wholeness, for the kind of freedom that leaves nothing untouched. And once you feel it, once you name it, you can't go back, but you can go forward. And in the next part, I'll show you how. Not with hacks, not with mantras, but with rebellion. A rebellion not against the world, but against the false self you've been forced to carry. It starts quietly, not with a revolution, not with a speech, not even with a tear, but with a whisper, a defiant, trembling voice from the part of you you've long buried, the voice that once asked, why not? Before the world taught you, because you can't. That's where the rebellion begins, not outside, but within. And make no mistake, this is war. A war not against society, not against your parents, not against your job, your bank account, or your ex. It's a war against the parts of you that were built to survive, but not to live. To rebel, you must break the first and most sacred rule of your programming. Keep them comfortable. Asaher, that's been your compass for years. Your guiding light in every room you entered, every mask you wore, every "I'm fine" you said through gritted teeth. But comfort is not safety, it's sedation. And what dies under sedation? Desire, curiosity, truth, self. You've been tranquilized by your own politeness. So here's the first act of rebellion. Tell the truth. Say the thing. Feel the thing. Break the performance. You don't need to scream. You don't need to destroy. You just need to stop lying to others, and especially to yourself. Do you know how much of your life is built on self-deception? The dreams you chase, the goals you post about, the version of yourself you show to the world, how much of it was chosen by you, and how much was installed by the fear of freedom? You think you're ambitious, but are you? Or are you just trying to become successful enough to finally earn permission to be yourself? That's not ambition. That's bargaining. You think you're disciplined, but are you? Or are you just afraid of what would happen if you stopped moving long enough to feel your own emptiness? That's not discipline. That's evasion. So what would rebellion look like for you? Maybe it's quitting a job that pays well but starves your soul. Maybe it's walking away from a relationship that fits but doesn't expand you. Maybe it's finally sitting in a room alone, without a screen, without a plan, and meeting the stranger you call me. It will be terrifying. Freedom always is, because it doesn't just give you space, it gives you mirrors, and some of those reflections will break you. You'll see the years you lost, the lies you told, the people you hurt just by being who they wanted instead of who you were. You'll grieve, you'll rage, you'll want to run back to the cage and beg for someone, anyone, to take the weight of your freedom away. But don't. Stay. Feel it. Burn. Because that pain, that's not failure, that's transformation. That's the death of the false self. And in its ashes, something holy is born. Now let's talk about action. Freedom is not a mindset, it's a practice. You can't think your way into liberation. You must live it. Every day, make one decision that terrifies your inner perfectionist. Say what you mean. Take the risk. Stop asking for permission. Turn the volume up on your soul, even if it makes the people around you uncomfortable, especially if it does, because comfort isn't the goal. Truth is, and truth will cost you everything that was built on the lie. Let it. You don't owe the world your consistency. You don't owe your past self loyalty. You don't owe your culture obedience. You don't owe your pain permanence. You owe yourself freedom. Not the Instagram kind, not the vacation kind, the kind that makes you dangerous again, wild again, alive again. And if you're afraid you'll lose people along the way, you're right. You will. But you won't lose love. You'll lose the people who only loved your mask. And in their absence, you'll find something better. Belonging. Not the kind that comes from fitting in. The kind that comes from being seen, truly seen, and still chosen. That's the reward of rebellion. Not approval, not applause, alignment. But understand this. Rebellion is not a phase. It's not a weekend retreat. It's not a new mindset. It's a way of being. It is the daily, relentless refusal to betray your soul for the illusion of security. It is the sacred vow to tell the truth, feel the fear, and walk into the wilderness of your own becoming. It is saying, I would rather lose the world than lose myself again. And when you live like that, you don't become chaotic. You become whole. So how do you begin? You already have. The moment you asked, why am I afraid of freedom? The moment you followed that question instead of ignoring it, you lit the match, and everything false began to burn. Let it burn, because on the other side of the ashes is you, the you that was never lost, only buried, only waiting. And when the smoke clears, when the fear softens, when the silence finally becomes peace, you will understand something sacred, and that's where we go next, the ultimate truth. The final, irreversible insight that changes everything. Silence. Not the kind that screams with absence, but the kind that hums with presence. That's what remains once the rebellion is over. You stand there, in the scorched field of your former life. No masks, no roles, no borrowed beliefs. Just you, naked, not in body, but in essence. No longer afraid of freedom, but reverent of its weight. And it's in this stillness, this post-rebellion clarity, that the ultimate truth reveals itself. You were never caged. You were never owned. You were never waiting. There was no captor. There was only you. The prison? Built from memory. The chains? Forged in fear. The rules? Echoes of voices long gone. You carried them because you were taught to. You obeyed them because it felt safe. You believed them because everyone else did too. But now you see, not just through the illusion, beyond it. You see that freedom was never a goal, it was a given. You were born free, before the scripts, before the shame, before the world taught you how to hate yourself just enough to stay manageable. That wildness in you, that part that never quite fit, never quite conformed, that was never the problem. It was the signal, the beacon calling you home. And here's the realization that breaks the spell forever. Freedom is not the opposite of fear. It is the integration of it. The myth is that one day you'll stop being afraid, that you'll reach some enlightened state where the doubts go quiet and the path is lit. But that's another cage, the cage of perfection. Real freedom is dancing with the fear, letting it ride shotgun but never take the wheel. Because fear doesn't vanish when you're free, it just stops being your god. And then you realize something even deeper. You were never seeking freedom. You were seeking responsibility, not the burdensome kind handed down by guilt or duty, but the sacred kind, the kind that says, I am the author now, not the victim, not the puppet, not the echo, but the origin. Freedom without responsibility is chaos. Responsibility without freedom is slavery. But together, they are sovereignty, and that is the final transformation, from prisoner to rebel to sovereign. You become the creator, not just of your choices, of meaning. You stop asking, what does this mean, like a lost child, and instead you declare, this is what I choose it to mean, because in the absence of structure, you become the architect. You write the myth, you carve the law, you sculpt the self, not as a reaction to the world, but as a gift to it. And suddenly, life is no longer something you endure, it is something you shape. With every decision, every truth told, every boundary drawn, every yes said with the full weight of your being, and every no that honors the divinity of your soul. But even then, there is one last fear, one final ghost that haunts the sovereign. What if I misuse this power? What if I choose wrong? What if I hurt someone? What if I fail? And here is where the deepest wisdom of all emerges. You will fall. you will hurt, you will bleed, and you will be free anyway. Because freedom is not about perfection, it is about wholeness. To be free is not to be right, it is to be real. To walk into the world as a question, not an answer. To love without scripts, to speak without rehearsal, to exist without needing permission. And when you live like that, you don't just liberate yourself, you liberate others. Your freedom becomes a mirror, a lighthouse, a quiet revolution, because someone out there is watching you, someone still hiding, still afraid, still performing. And when they see you, scars and all, standing in your truth, they'll feel something stir, something ancient, something wild, the memory of their own freedom. And without a word, you give them permission, not to be you, but to be them. That is the legacy of the liberated, to remind the world of what it forgot, that we were never meant to be tamed. So now, here you are, at the end of a story that was really the beginning, not because you found all the answers, but because you've finally stopped asking the wrong questions. You've stopped chasing safety. You've stopped performing identity. You've remembered that the soul is not a brand, not a label, not a product. It is a fire, and fire does not explain itself. It burns. So go, burn, live, choose, fail, love. And when the fear returns, because it will, don't fight it. Thank it. Because fear is the shadow of freedom. And every time it shows up, it's proof you're on the edge again. Where life happens, where truth lives, where you belong. Not in the cage, not in the rebellion, but in the fire. The final truth is simple. You were always free. You just forgot. And now, you remember.